Hi, hello everyone. So I decided to come in a scant 2 minutes earlier. I'm really excited to be the one hosting the Uncut Thread episode today. I've been away for a while, but I'm so thankful, always for the opportunity to connect. And I'm excited to share with you our topic today. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes because I'm actually on a bit earlier than I should have. But I just wanted to get everything on the way. So really excited. As you know, today our topic is talking about indigenous fabrics beyond the wax prints. And I just want to bring my perspective to it and, hopefully share your thoughts as well. So as you know, in the email, the Zoom link is also available. So if you wanted to join me live, you are free to do that. If you wanted to watch on YouTube, you're also free to do that. So, yes, really looking forward to today. I'm going to be talking about some of the changes, that I've noticed even with the indigenous fabrics. And I think it just gives us a little bit more knowledge, about what is out there, what our options are, and how to approach them for quilting. So thank you so much once again for joining me. I have my eyes on my tablet so that I can see your comments, questions, and I can respond to them. So please don't be shy. Share your thoughts with me. I look forward to a lively discussion today. All right. So, yeah. Okay, so we have some ladies joining us. Thank you so much for coming. All right. So without much ado, I am going to get started. I think as people come in, they just make themselves comfortable. You can drop your comments in the Zoom chat or in the YouTube chat. I'll toggle between the two to make sure that, I don't miss anything. Thank you so much for coming, Miss Lisa and Miss Joyce. I'm so happy to see you today. Okay. All right, so I'll just talk a little bit, like share my point of view and share some observations that I've made and show some fabric samples. And then I am going to open the floor, for us to discuss. So we're exploring the subtle beauty, and the use of monochromatic natural dyes on African textiles that, that would be suitable for modern quilting, as it were. And the real argument is this, not just the perception, but also the fabric itself. You know, subtle African textiles actually exist beyond the wax prints. Most times people just think African fabrics and their minds just go to the wax prints that are so vibrant and so busy and so colorful, But the truth is that a lot of indigenous African fabrics, their talking points and the thing that makes them unique is their subtleness and then their geometry, the geometry of their patterns. You find that in Bogolan, you find that in modcloth, which is Bogolan, you find that in Kente, you find that also in Ashoke, even Adire. A lot of the times is the geometry. It's not really the color. One of the reasons being that back in the day, the strong dyes that would make those colors pop were just not available. They were just not available. Natural dyes mostly were used, of course, from barks of trees, from soil, and from some animals that excrete some things, and all of that, fruits and vegetables and leaves. That was what they were using for dye. So today I just want to challenge that assumption. It's not all about wax print. It's not all about those bold and colorful patterns, and all of that. Africa has a textile tradition that spans thousands of years. And by virtue of that, the textiles that come out of that era are not bold. They are not colorful. They are almost nothing like the wax prints. They're actually nothing like the wax prints. The colors are more subtle, you know, more monochromatic actually. You know, they tend to be that most of the time. So I just wanted to make that clear. Not all African fabrics are loud, you know, color loudness. Not that they're loud, but you know, color loudness. And then also the texture, you know, the textures of indigenous fabrics are different. A lot of the times they're different from the wax prints because traditionally woven textiles were used. And so they would tend to be less finely woven, like the wax print, you know. If you imagine like I think we call it burlap. I don't know what it's called in the for you. I think I know the name, but I can't remember. The brown sack. Yes. So it's more like brown sack, you know, thicker, thicker yarn, thicker fibers, you know, but still tightly woven. So they're not as slim and thin as the wax prints are. So when you look at all of these fabrics, the natural undyed form is a whole lot different, from what you have right now. So I just have some Adire that I want to share, and then we'll talk about them one by one. I want to talk about Adire, then I'll talk about the wax prints. Then I'm going to talk about a sample of traditional woven fabrics that I have, that I've been sitting on, I've been thinking about, you know, and maybe at the end of, we're going to be talking about what we're going to do with it and how, you know, how it's going to feature in all of this. Thank you so much, Cheryl and Bob, for coming. I see you in the YouTube chat and I really appreciate it. So you know that Adire is one of the more common textiles in West Africa. And as far as I know, it's a West African thing. You're talking Nigeria, you're talking Ghana, you're talking Mali, and the birthplace of tie and dye is actually said to be Mali. So from Mali, the technique spread to other parts of Africa. And during the trade period of Africa, you know, in the 1800s, 1700s, when trade was very vibrant across Africa, you also had batik knowledge, tie and dye knowledge coming from northern parts of Africa, Morocco specifically, and it went round the Muslim areas of Western Africa, you know, because it settled in Kano, and Kano, they used the same methods that are used in Morocco, you know. The fabric of Adire is as important as the patterns, you know, that were made on it. Because they were hand woven, you could find them in various grades. Even now, there are various grades. You know, even now you find them in various grades. And then it was much more so, because you would find what the elites and the highly people of high status would use would be different from what the commoners would use. And what everyone would use as ceremonial would be different from what would be used for everyday wear, you know. And so the textile itself was as important as the processing of it when it comes to Adire. Okay, so the structure, the texture, and the absorbency particularly was very, very important, the absorbency of the fabric. And the good thing is because it was all not 100% cotton, it was very absorbent, it was very good, and it was very suitable for the climate. So that's one thing um to to consider. But one thing that I've noticed lately is that modern Adire makers are moving away from the traditional woven fabrics, and they are moving into polished cotton. And I've noticed that polished cotton does not hold up well to the dyes, to the methods of dyeing that are still being used here. So when they apply the dye, it weakens the integrity of the fabric. And often you tend to find some tears and some rips. It doesn't age as well as the actual indigenous fabrics used to, using the old textiles and the old dyeing methods. So that's one thing that has really concerned me in the recent past. And you remember that I started with fabrics of heritage, and I had to stop because I was not satisfied with the textile itself, the raw cloth that was being used. The methods of dyeing, the patterns of dyeing were still good, still reflected heritage with a blend of the modern, but the raw fabric itself, they had lost touch with it. They had now gone into the imported stuff, and it was all polished cotton. And honestly, polished cotton does not hold well to the patterns that are being used. And so I have I think these ones that I have are not so bad. They're not so bad in terms of the structure of the textile. But I have seen some, and I have had complaints from women that use them for dressmaking, that it's not holding up as well as it should, or as well as it used to when you compare them to the vintage ones that our parents have, But like I said, when it comes to the color and it comes to the patterns and designs, they are still spot on. They are traditional. You can see some of the traditional styles, and techniques that are being used. They're still very obvious in the adires that are being made. And then, of course, we talk about beloved wax prints, para wax prints, African fabrics. These are names that are synonymous with the wax prints. Once you say African fabrics, everybody's mind just goes into Ankara, and the method of production of this. And I think let me start with this, that I think I have mentioned that the method of production of the wax prints varies because of the different types of manufacturers that you have, the different brands, especially now that are coming into the market. There are so many brands are in say maybe like 30, 20, 40 years ago, it wasn't difficult to spot the good from the bad because the brands were few. In fact, in Nigeria, I think there were only like 3 brands. It was either Velisco, Holland, or it was the English wax, or it was the Nigerian wax. And the Nigerian wax had grades. The Dutch wax, the Holland, the Velisco was the highest quality and the highest priced. Then came the English wax, and then came the Nigerian wax. And that was the trend across Western Africa, where wax prints are created. You would find that the Dutch would be the highest price because they had proprietary techniques, dyeing methods and dyeing methods, and the type of raw textile that they used was very proprietary. They've had like hundreds of years to perfect it, and stuff like that. But the other types would now fall under that. For the Nigerian wax, I remember there was a grade 1 Nigerian wax, a grade 2 Nigerian wax, and then there was a grade 3. So that meant that even for those who couldn't afford the foreign brands, like the Velisco and the English wax, they could afford any one of the grades of the Nigerian wax. And the difference between the Nigerian wax and the foreign brands was really design. The Velisco had patterns and color combinations that were unique and were different and a blend of modern, But the Nigerian wax was really good quality. But I remember the colors being very drab. They were not as colorful as the Velisco or the English wax. Velisco really had the best colors, really vibrant, really beautiful. English wax sometimes would stumble on vibrant colors, but it was also muted. It was a bit drab, a bit, muted. Talking about the monochromatic that we're talking about, and then the Nigerian wax was even more so muted, even more monochromatic, because I guess they didn't have the technology, to mix the colors and to blend them in the way that the Dutch could, So those were the differences that I noticed at that time. And so if you look at the modern designs, even with the modern techniques and dyes of the Adire, you can still see a difference. This is more muted, more tending towards being monochromatic than this one. The contrast here is very high. There are contrasts here, but it's not so in your face. It's not high. The contrast is not high. But the wax print will come with high contrast in both pattern and color. And I have a few more samples here to just show high contrast, show you without the sticker, so you can see the pattern and the colors. High contrast, high color, and look at this orange one, And these were colors that you really wouldn't have found with Nigerian wax at that time. They were mostly heavy blues, and the heavy blues would mostly be blended with reds, reds that were more maroon than tomato red. And then some yellows that were more mustard, than yellow and stuff like that. So those are the differences, that you can see. The more traditional, the closer to the grassroots the fabric is, the more monochromatic it is, But the more high-tech the process, the sharper the contrast, the sharper the boldness, the sharper the colors. All of the indigenous fabrics, all the major ones that we know. And typically, African fabrics really fall into either woven or plant-based, like the Kuba, woven like Kente, Ashoke, or the dyed, like the Adire. So that's the broad classification of any type of fabric that you will find in Africa. It falls into any one of these, and you would find that they were more monochromatic and more muted, that you find with the wax print. So the story of the indigenous fabrics is not just in the process, but it's also in the palettes, the color palettes, honestly, the brightness and the boldness of wax prints is a relatively recent development. It's relatively recent, because I remember even in the 80s, in the early 90s, even the Velisco was not as bright as it is now. It was not as bright as, as it is, as you see it now. And if you, I think there was a time I did a talk on the heritage patterns that came out of Velisco that were very popular in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s. I don't think I have any here, but they were muted. They were muted reds and muted blues, unlike what you find right now. All right, so I'm going to reveal to you what I discovered, because I've been giving a lot of thoughts lately about the fabrics that are on the market, thinking about their structure, thinking about their colors, thinking about the quality, you know, and doing a little bit of research, buying samples here, buying samples here, just playing with the fabrics, you know, looking what's available, what is possible, you know, and then I discovered this fabric that is called Funtua fabric. You know, it's one of the last hand-woven indigenous textiles that are being produced in large quantities. They're one of the last ones. And I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to try to explain a bit of what I'm saying. So it's quite a lot. It's about 5 yards and it's by 90, so it's quite big. I can't unroll everything, but I'm hoping if I hold it up to the camera, you'll be able to see some of the texture of it. Maybe not so much, but this is like well-woven cotton. The history of cotton in Nigeria is that it is grown in the north. You know, the cotton plantations are mostly in the north because, of course, the north is hot, is dry, you know, so the cottons can be grown and they can dry and be harvested, you know, and all of that. So the northern parts of Nigeria and mostly the West Africa, cotton is grown in the north because the south is the Atlantic. And in the Atlantic, there rains and, you know, cotton doesn't thrive there. So the Funtua people, they've kept their tradition alive. And the method they use in weaving is mostly like the same method of weaving fabrics for Adire back in the days. It is tight, but it's also loose enough for you to know that this is hand woven. It's for you to know that this is not factory made. You know, this is not factory made. It's tight enough and loose enough and rough enough for you to know that this is hand woven. And then you can see it doesn't even have a selvage. It just has these loose ends and it doesn't come off, to also show you the quality of the work that they do. So a little bit of background on Funtua. Funtua is a city in Katsina State, you know, and it is traditionally one of the strongholds of cotton, you know, called both the cultivation and the production and the textile production. And so this fabric is plain weave hand woven. That's what it's called. Plain weave hand woven cotton in the tradition where they are just very lightly processed, you know, because generally you don't really find highly industrialized methods of doing things in Africa. Generally, they're not highly industrialized. So they would probably be just a little bit, you know, the processing would be a little bit refined, you know. But honestly, this is one of the better ones. High absorbency, tight weave, soft cotton, perfect for the weather, you know. And even though it's finer, I think this would make much better base for a lot of the African fabrics that we have, especially when it comes to Adire. The weave for the ashoke is slightly different. It's thicker, it's rougher, it's bigger. You know, the spool of thread that they use, they spin it a little thicker. And so it doesn't come as fine as this. And so because this cotton is not treated, it is not polished, you know, it remains very receptive to natural and chemical dyes. It does not fade off easily. You know, it doesn't fade off easily and it doesn't get damaged when you use that. The dye will bond to the fibers and, you know, much better than any surface coating, you know, and all of that. Now, it has its irregularities. You can see some streaks of really thick weaving and some that are a little bit finer. And it is just beautiful. I know you cannot see it, but I got 5 yards of it and I've just held on to it. And in my opinion, whether it is made, whether it is used for wax prints or it is used for Adire, it's going to turn out beautifully. It's going to turn out beautifully. And so when you dye this fabric, it's going to respond, you know. But when you dye the polished cotton that they're using, it kind of like just endures it. It doesn't, it's beautiful, but it doesn't come out in the richness. Funtua fabrics give it depth because we did a little bit of testing with it and the dyeing had some depth. It wasn't sharp to the eye, but it had depth. And then of course, because it was finely woven, you know, it was soft, it was really supple, you know, in a way that modern Adire really is not. And so when you're talking about earth tones and subtle beauty, you know, I think that the Funtua in its undyed or naturally dyed state is already a study. You know, it will take dyes. It will even take natural dyes. You can actually soak some berries or soak some bark of a tree. And when you apply it here, it's going to adhere. You know, it's going to adhere. And even before and once indigo touches it, indigo being as strong as it is, it's definitely going to adhere because it comes in this natural white, creamy kind of color, you know, depending on the cotton variety, you know. So I don't know. When you also talk about subtle beauty in the other types of textiles, if you look at the mud cloth by its very nature is very subtle. It's browns. And the only contrast it will have is a bit of white, a bit of black, and maybe some reddish tones, reddish hues. But that's also a very subtle fabric. If you look at the Kuba or the other fabrics that are from plants, they're also very subtle, you know, very subtle, very muted, you know, they're not all of that. And so as a modern quilter, the way that you would think about these natural colors, natural to indigenous African textile colors in your quilting, is to either think of how you're going to isolate it as a piece, you know, and spotlight it in your work, or how you're going to match those textures with whatever textile, whatever either solid or prints, you know, that you pair with it. It can be a background, it can be a spotlight, you know, but however you combine that is going to give authentic, is going to give that authentic African textile and also hues. It's going to give the African hues are usually red, oranges, browns, you know, like, for lack of knowing the color name, something like cotton colored, like milk, you know, milk tea color, you know, that is like light brown, and then the deeper browns and the reds and the yellows and the oranges, you know, so what I'm trying to do, and I'm not sure I'm succeeding, is to just contest the fact that when you think African fabrics, don't think the wax prints, don't think the bold colors of the wax prints. You know, you have to kind of like shift your mindset a little and think about the muted colors and think about the geometry, that it's a combination of both geometry, process, and less about the colors. But when you think about the wax print, it's really more about the colors, you know. And in modern quilting, I think that those muted colors will sit better, will kind of like work better because they blend in, you know, a whole lot more. So, one of the reasons why I got this was because I wanted to experiment. I'm talking with some dyers to see how we can use this Funtua fabric, you know, to create designs and patterns. Because the samples that we made was so good. It was so good. And the dye adhered. It wasn't running. It was color fast. It was beautiful. It was rich. And it was good to the touch, you know. And I just feel that it's going to serve a whole lot better than what is obtainable now. The only caution is that when you want to mix it with the wax print, you will find it a whole lot different because the wax print is very tightly woven. This one is not. It's strong, but it's not as tightly woven. And if you can see, it's a bit see-through. And even with color, it's going to be see-through because those fibers are not mechanically woven, you know, woven to be tight, you know. So, I want you to just think beyond the color, think about what your fabric was dyed in, think about the process, you know, think about the ancient process, think about the dyes that they had obtainable and the technology that the makers of indigenous fabrics had that is a whole lot different from what the Dutch did, you know, in producing the wax prints, because that subtle beauty, the subtle beauty, you know, that we're talking about today is actually what indigenous fabrics are about. It's really not the wax prints. The subtle beauty and the monochrome and the subtle colors, that is really what what African fabrics are really about, you know. Because I keep saying that wax prints are lingua franca. It's not of African heritage of origin. It's like a lingua franca. It's like the adopted fabric of Africa. You know, in as much as it represents Africa, it should not be the only representation of textile beauty, you know, that you have of African fabrics or African textiles. It's not, in fact, it's not even, it's not even, it's not even it shouldn't be. It is fast becoming the only representation of African textiles, but it shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't be. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to just point out, you know. Vibrant wax prints should be the introduction. When you have your wax prints and you have these colors that are so bright and, you know, so like the contrast is beautiful, the symmetry, the production is so beautiful. It should actually be the introduction. It should be the thing that catches. I'm so sorry. That was like really loud thunder. I was looking around for where my children were. It sounded like an explosion. I'm so sorry. I don't know if you heard it. Oh Lord, I honestly thought
said it all.
Oh, I thought it was an explosion because, you know, we've been having some strikes here in Nigeria, some military action, not anywhere near where I am. But I thought, oh my God, has it come to our doorstep? What are we going to do? That was exactly what I was thinking. So I'm so sorry about that. Oh Lord, it sounded like an explosion. All right. So yeah. So as I was saying, think about the wax print as your introduction, but seek to go beyond, the brightness of the wax prints into the subtlety, of the indigenous fabrics. And the unfortunate thing is that these days you're not finding as many samples of pure indigenous fabrics as there should be, because it's all about commercialization. The processes are being shortened. The techniques are being shortened. The processes are being shortened, and a lot of the dyes, the things that are being used for production are being swapped, swapped for what has been industrially produced. So more and more and more, you're finding it hard to get the pure fabrics of how it used to be, and that's why I'm honestly so excited about this Funtua fabric, because I think it contains endless possibilities. One, because its process is still the
Like we lost her.
Yes, just hold on. Hopefully she'll get back on. A lot of times that happens with her Wi-Fi. It glitches. So hang in. Hopefully she'll get back on.
Okay. No worries. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, ladies and gents, I think because Miriam has not been able to get back on, apparently maybe the big boom she had heard has something to do that knocked her Wi-Fi out. So it doesn't look like she's going to get back on at the moment. And yeah, so if you want to hang in there a few more minutes, we can. Otherwise, she'll probably record this later and maybe finish it up another time when her Wi-Fi is more stable. So I'm gonna hang in there for a little bit longer to see if she's able to get back on.
Yes. Hi, everyone, I'm so sorry. I just went off totally. Thank you for keeping things going, Lisa. Can you hear me at all?
Yes, I hear you. I was trying. Yes, I can. I can hear you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, good. You're back.
You can hear me? Okay, that's
Yes.
good. All right. I think that was quite it was so scary. So it's raining now. I think it's a bit of a storm. So I'm not sure how long my connection will stay up. Yes. So I'm so sorry for the break in transmission. Yeah, and I think we can just talk and chat. I'll respond to some comments in the YouTube chat, and then we can just get on with it. So yes, it's really beautiful cotton. That's what Monica said, that it's beautiful cotton. Connie wants to know where we can obtain this fabric. So right now I'm buying it through a third party. And in my experience, buying things through a third party is usually not the best way to go. So I'm looking for the source. I'm trying to get my way to the source. Though to be honest, even through a third party is not so bad. But if I'm thinking of getting it in a large quantity, I think it's best to go to the source. So once I work things out, I'll definitely let you know for anyone who is interested in it. But I've been in touch with a few dyers and a few wax print manufacturers to see how I can use this fabric for either or both. So as it progresses, I'll be letting you know. Yes, yes, absolutely. Bob does a wonderful job of mixing fabrics, saris with African prints and solids and wax prints and so many other stuff. So I think this would be right. This would be perfect for that sort of thing, and the fabric honestly would work any sort of printing that you want to do on it, whether screen printing or wax or resist, I think it would just be perfect. It's really wonderful. Yes. So Anticipation says she's new to sewing and learning about fabric. Yes. So like I said, wax print is the introduction to Africa. It's like wax print is like the African who has come out to the world and left their traditions behind. So, and if you live near any African community, you would know that you can take the African out of Africa, but you can't really take Africa out of the African. If you have lived around African communities or Africans, you know that it's very hard to separate us from our culture and our traditions and our way of doing things. So you might see the African looking polished, but way behind them, they're doing the African stuff. You know, so that's how you would look at the wax print as the polished front or the cosmopolitan textile, you know, that everybody's attracted to. It's colorful, it's bright, it's beautiful, it calls you. But behind that, you have the indigenous fabrics that are more subtle, that are more grounded, you know, in tradition and culture and all sorts of things, you know, that carry the messages of the geometry of the patterns and the process, and everything is ceremony, everything has a meaning, you know, so that's really how you would look at it. So I hope you can hear me. I'm happy to hear any comments from anyone who is on Zoom with me. And I'm really excited about it. And I think as soon as I make any sort of decision or make any sort of movement, but I'm back, and I think because of the weather, you know, it's best that we bring the meeting to a close. And I'll still keep my eye on the chat to see if there's anything that you would there are any comments. So I'm not even sure you can hear me. I don't even think I'm on YouTube anymore. I think that connection has broke.
We can hear you.
Yeah, the
No,
connection is broken. Yeah.
we can hear you, and I think you're
So-
still on YouTube, but we can hear
Oh,
you
I
on.
am? Okay.
We can hear you on Zoom, and I
Okay.
have you on. I think you're still on.
But I'm not sure they can hear me though.
Wait, yes, you can.
Yeah,
let me
it's
see.
been raining. It's raining quite. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear any comments from anyone who is on Zoom.
Sorry, we were able
see
to hear
myself
you
on
on. We were able to hear you on
No,
both. 'cause
sorry,
I
go
have-
ahead. Sorry.
No, we were able to hear you on both. It might be a delay, but I
Oh,
got you
really?
on both. Yeah, you're on YouTube and you're on.
Okay, it wasn't showing me anything. It just kept kicking me out.
Yeah, but it's glitching. It's glitching for sure. Okay, well, she's out now for sure.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes. You're welcome. I think she's out. I think she's out. She is out.
But I'm back, and I think because of the weather, you know, it's best that we bring the meeting to a close. And I'll still keep my eye on the chat to see if there's anything that you would any comments.
Okay, so she said that they're in the midst of a storm. She's totally out, so she's going to end it for today, and then she'll, I guess, pick it up and have this discussion at a later date if she feels that's what she can do. So we're finished for the day. So thank you, ladies and gents, for joining us, and have a wonderful day. And we'll hear from the Uncut Threads again another time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day,
You
ladies.
too. Be
All
safe.
right. Thank you.
Exactly does Accra have to offer?
We've been having storms here too.
Mm,
Yeah.
Every agent
yeah.
development company that I have.
Bad one spring came through this morning, but now it's, what is it? 75 degrees. I opened the patio door. It's pretty out. I'm in Baltimore area, Catonsville,
Uh-huh.
Maryland. It's pretty out now. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.